Welcome back to Medrash Umaisa, sharing a story for this week's Parshas Nitzavim-Vayelech. The Chofetz Chaim, B'Shmuel Meir HaKohen, used to travel a lot in order to sell his Svarim, especially the Sefer Chofetz Chaim and Shmiras HaLashon that he wrote about the laws of the halachas of speech. At one point he was staying in Vilna in a certain achsanya, an inn, and he noticed something in the dining room. There was a very large, rough-looking Jew sitting in the dining room, and he very rudely commanded the waitress to bring him some roast duck and bread and a large glass of whiskey or vodka. And when she brought it to him, he set to eating it very gluttonously, and while he was gorging himself, he continued to heap abuse upon the poor waitress. The Chofetz Chaim was not going to let this girl suffer this man's abuse, and he stood up and started to take steps toward the man's table. Now the innkeeper watched what was happening, and he saw what the Chofetz Chaim was doing. He ran over and he quickly pulled the Chofetz Chaim to the side, and he said, "Rebbe, please, this man is an ignorant brute. He's Jewish, but from a young age he spent 25 years in the Tsar's army. There's really no one to talk to here about manners. I'm afraid that if you do try to instruct him, he's going to abuse you and possibly hit you as well." He then continued, he said, "In reality, it's really kind of a pity. You have to have pity on this man. He was age 7 when they took him in this gezerah, the decrees known as the Cantonistim, the Cantonist decrees, in which the Russian army would take little children from their Jewish homes and first bring them up among non-Jews separately, and then to draft them into the army for decades." He says, it's hard to know what to expect of him living under such circumstances. He was isolated from other Jews. He was isolated from Judaism. He's totally ignorant. The Chofetz Chaim continued on to the man's table. When he came, he stretched out his hand. He said, "Shalom Aleichem." And he said, "I've heard about you." He says, "I heard that when you were a little child, you were kidnapped and taken far away from your family, far away from other Jews. You were in the Russian army where you were forced to break Shabbos, to eat non-kosher food, and you were pressured certainly to convert to Christianity, but you didn't. You remained a Jew. You retained your Jewish identity under all of that suffering." He says, "I would be happy to have the schuyos, to have the merits that you have. Someone who underwent what you did and retained his Jewish identity is going to have a place in the next world among the greatest tzaddikim." He says, it's not a small thing. What you did was something of great mesiras nefesh, great self-sacrifice. The man had never heard anyone speak to him in that way before. Other Jews looked at him with contempt. Someone happened to mention to him, he said, "This is the Chofetz Chaim speaking to you." Now, as strange as it may seem, and I've heard evidence of this before, Jews of all types everywhere in Eastern Europe knew that name, the Chofetz Chaim. I met some who were very ignorant in other ways, but they knew and revered the name of the Chofetz Chaim. When he heard that it was the Chofetz Chaim who was speaking to him in that way, he burst out crying. And the Chofetz Chaim kept holding his hands, and he said, "You are among the Kedoshim who have been Moser Nefesh, who has given their all for Kiddush Hashem, for sanctifying Hashem's name by keeping your identity." He said, "And if now that you're free of the Russian army, you would learn how to keep mitzvahs fully and to live as a Jew," he says, "then there would be no one more fortunate than you on the face of the earth." And the man asked the Chofetz Chaim to please teach him, and that began his path of return to a life of Torah and mitzvahs. In this week's Parsha, we have a lot of discussion of the future history of the Jewish people, of our history, of Golus, of being lost, and of return. And the Pasuk says, "V'shav Hashem eshvuscha v'richamecha." Hashem will bring back your returnees and have mercy on you. Chazal, notice that the Pasuk says V'shav, which means he will return, as opposed to Yoshiv, that Hashem will cause to return. From there they learned that Hashem is with us in our golus, in our exiles. V'shav lo nemar, it doesn't say v'shav. V'heshiv lo nemar, it doesn't say that Hashem will bring us back, or yoshiv, it says v'shav, that He will come back with us. That teaches us shchinta begalusa, that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, was with us in the Golus. Here the story of the Chofetz Chaim opens up another window that's very important for us to see. He teaches us that this man was actually doing tremendous avodas Hashem in that time of Golus. Hashem was with him. He was bringing the Shekhinah into the world by that act, which to us may seem simple, of retaining his Jewish identity under those circumstances. If we would have looked at a film of his life while in the Russian army, it's nothing we would have written down in a storybook for children of the stories of tzaddikim and the stories of gedolim. But the Chofetz Chaim didn't lie. If he told the man that he had tremendous zchuyos just for his life there, and he did so much for Am Yisrael and for the world by the life that he lived there of retaining his Jewish identity, it was true. And when he said that this man will sit among the great tzaddikim in the Olam HaEmes, in the world of truth, just for that, even before the Chofetz Chaim taught him about the mitzvahs, that's true. So we have to keep our eyes open. Sometimes a person sees a Jew that they think is so far, and they may not realize that the Shekhinah is with him at that distance that he's at, and that he himself is bringing the Shekhinah into the world in ways that perhaps we can't see. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu help us, all of us, be able to come back, and even as we're coming back, to recognize that He has been with us and is with us throughout. Have a wonderful Shabbos.